We're going to be in Luke 24, so grab your Bibles, and if you don't have one, there's one there right in the seat in front of you. That is for you to keep. And like I said, we're going to be in Luke 24. We've been working our way through the Bible, and we're in the life of Christ. And I got to tell you, we only have actually this lesson and the next lesson, and we're done with the life of Christ insofar as Matthew, Mark, and Luke goes. We're going to pick it up when we go through John later on in I don't even want to guess when we'll pick up John, but it's coming. We're going to pick up the Gospel of John, and so we've got this week and next week, and then our preaching team is picking up the book of Genesis. And I got to tell you, I met with the preaching team again last Friday, and it's going to be good stuff, and at the same time, I'm kind of bummed. I think we're going to go through Genesis twice. We're going to go through Genesis, then when I come back, we're going to do it again. So there's just so much great material that you're going to learn, and it's just a ton of stuff. So, but today we're in Luke 24, and before we jump right into the text, I want to talk to you about maybe something that somebody can relate to here, and that is, I really like, does anybody remember the game Tetris? Anybody remember that game Tetris? Are there any Tetris players still here today? I mean, yeah, there's some Tetris players here. Yeah, you know, I kind of like that game. I like it in real life. Like, there's a meeting I go to on Wednesdays where it's my job to set out material for a group. And so in this box there are brochures and books and pamphlets, and so I lay all this stuff out, and I do it in a certain way, and I'm kind of proud of myself how I do it, because I lay it out in the middle of the table and it all fits. Now, if you did it differently, it wouldn't all fit, but you do it this way, it all fits. The pamphlets go here, the spiral books go here, the hardback books go here, and then the paperbacks go towards the end. And people know that. There is a comfort in knowing when you come in, you know where your stuff is at. And then I'm even more anal about this, I should say, because I want to put it back in the box the same way. There's a way it goes back in the box, that all this stuff fits back in the box. And it has to, because the lid's closed and then have to be slid on a shelf. And if you don't get the lid closed all the way, it won't go back into the shelf. And so there's a way that it has to be done. And so sometimes I'm a little late getting to the meeting, and so somebody helps me put it out. And as they're doing it, there's a part of me, my fingers are just like this. I'm just like, you know, and I'm having to say to myself, it doesn't really matter, it'll be fine, until it's time to put it away. Now, when it's time to put it away, people will come and even offer, hey, can we help you put this stuff away? And I'll say yes, but then I'll change everything they do. They put it in the box, and I take it back out of the box. Because I want to help people feel helpful, but at the same time, they have no idea what they're doing. And so I'm putting it in a box, because it has to fit in this box. Now, I don't want to misrepresent myself as if that's the way I live all of my life. Just go to my sock drawer, or really any drawers, and you'll find that I have more of a carte blanche type of way of doing it. But in that box, it goes a certain way. Is there anybody that can relate to this at all? Is there anybody like, are you one of the guys here that when luggage is brought to the car to go on a vacation, you do not let them put it in the car, that you tell them, put it near the bumper, I will put it in, because there is a way it has to go in, right? Now, here's the thing, there's probably 100 ways. I don't care about the 100 ways, only my way, because my way is the most efficient way. I have plenty of room. I could probably double it, but it doesn't matter. I just want it to fit, you know? And so I just kind of have these things about me, because here's the thing. It's supposed to go like this, and it's supposed to fit like this. And when things don't fit like this, or they don't go the way they're supposed to go sometimes, there's something that happens. I get anxious. And if I can, I'll fix it. To such a degree, I have unpacked my car and repacked it. Not because it didn't fit, it just wasn't done right. And you know, there's just a part where it needs to go a certain way. When we talk about the two on the road to Emmaus, and you remember in where we're at in the life of Christ, as Jesus has died and risen from the dead, and he's had one appearance. Does anybody remember the appearance? We talked about this last week. Who has he appeared to? This is his first appearance after he's resurrected. Anybody know who he appeared to? Yeah, he appeared to the women, right? So just to ramp up to the story, the women had showed up Sunday morning to put spices on his body. They get there, the stone isn't where it's supposed to be. There's an angel there. There's two angels there actually in the tomb. The women go in, they find that Jesus' body is gone. The angels say, hey, I know you're looking for Jesus. He ain't here. He's risen from the dead. Go back, tell the disciples, I'll meet him in Galilee. So the women gather their stuff, they head back, and as they're running back to tell the disciples, this is last week's message, Jesus appears, remember? So they go up, they worship him, they clasp his feet, and Jesus says, hey, that's great. Let's get up, go tell the disciples. So that being said, we walk into the text here in Luke chapter 24. So if you got your Bibles, Luke 24, we're going to be verse 13. It says, now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus. So this same day. So up to this point, just by way of chronology, there's two of these guys that are going to be walking from Jerusalem to a village 7 miles away called Emmaus. And we're going to find out in this text that these two guys had been with the disciples when the ladies had come and told them that they had seen Jesus and that he had risen from the dead. And they're going to share some of this in just a bit. And so it's been resurrection. Peter and John have gone and checked out the tomb by this point as well. They've come back, and now they're heading home. They're heading back to Emmaus. And it says in verse 14, they were talking with each other about everything that had happened. Everything that had happened, they were talking to each other about. Let me ask you a question this morning before we go very far. What, I'm going to miss the chair. What do you think they talked about? What do you think the discussion was as they left Jerusalem that Sunday afternoon and headed back? Now again, given the women have come, shared what they experienced, Peter and John have gone and checked out the tomb, shared what they experienced, and now they're heading back to Emmaus. I mean, what do you think they're talking about? What's the conversation like? If you were them, what would you be talking about? Is this a cruel joke? Okay, that's good. Good, what else? Right. So they're talking about some of the memories. Good, what else? Yeah, this is quite an unexpected turn of events, right? Yeah, good, what else? Unfulfilled expectations. Okay. Good, what else? What? Can you believe this? What now? Now what do we do? Yeah? Okay. So they're still hoping, they still have a little bit of hope? Okay. You know, it's interesting. I mean, if we go back and we just kind of put ourselves in their shoes a bit, let's do just a little bit of backtracking. A week from that day, a week from the day, it could very well be the 7 days from the point of this happening. We remember Jesus had just come into Jerusalem. We call it the triumphal entry. There was just a ticket tape parade for this guy. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people had welcomed him into Jerusalem on Sunday, the previous week. Monday, he cleansed the temple. I mean, huge home run day. Cleanses the temple, really establishes himself as he's a guy that can make things happen. He's going to be the guy that can get this done. Tuesday, he's confronted the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin. I mean, he has across the board stumped everybody. By Tuesday, he is at the top of the heap. And all of his disciples, everybody that was following him, I mean, they had bet all their money on this guy. I mean, this guy was going to be the one that was going to usher in a brand new kingdom. This guy was going to be the one that was going to bring David's house back into prestige, back to honor, back to glory. We'll have the days of Solomon where we're swimming in gold. I mean, they really believed that this was going to be it. And these two were a part of that discipleship core. Now, they're not part of the original 12, but they could very well be a part of the original 72. I mean, on Tuesday, at the end of Tuesday, you imagine, I can only imagine that they're at the local guild knocking mugs together, just waiting for the day that this is going to happen. Wednesday, we don't get a lot of news. Thursday is Passover. Friday morning, so that's Tuesday. By Friday morning, these two wake up, open the paper to read, Jesus Christ convicted of capital crime to be executed, to be crucified this afternoon. And that's Friday. And by Friday afternoon, Jesus is dead and buried. Well, Saturday they can't go anywhere because it's Sabbath, so they're stuck in Jerusalem. And so as soon as they can, Sunday morning, they take off. And they're heading back home. I mean, I think some of you, I'd echo the same things you said. I would think that I just put some words down here. They were confused. They're hurt. They're discouraged. It's going to say that they were downcast. They were disillusioned. I mean, I can only imagine as they're walking, they're looking at one another. I mean, almost a sense of they don't know what to say. Like they're like, what just happened? What just happened? They don't know what to make of it. The women have gone down and they came back, and we'll read here in just a bit what they thought of their report, but I mean, absolute discouragement. This was not the way it was supposed to go. You said unfulfilled expectations. I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, this is not the way this was supposed to go down. This is not happening. And I was thinking about a time that I've experienced this, and I can tell you a real poignant time was when my oldest son was a part of the first Bend team that went down in 2011 down to the Little League World Series. I know we just had one coming up, which they had a great run, the Bend North team, but the Bend South team was the first team to do it, and in a long time. And so they were down there, and I remember we went to districts. Noah and his team went to districts, and we won districts, which you don't even know. You wouldn't know how huge that was unless you knew how many times we came in second. We came in second to Bend North, the evil empire, Mordor, Mountain View. Okay, so anyways, and of course God plants our church right across from them. I still pray for them every day. And so anyways, the point is that, I mean, it was Bend North, and we won. We actually beat them. We were in Hermiston, I remember that, and we beat them. We beat Bend North, and so we were going to go to the state championship, or the state tournament, which was here in Bend. We were like, well, we didn't really have high hopes for that because the teams from the north, teams from Portland always get in every year. Murray Hill, Raleigh Hill, those are the teams that always make. I mean, they're I don't know how they do it. They're on steroids, I'm sure, but they're juicing up there. I just know that they came down, and that was our first game. So I thought, well, the first game, okay. So you root the kids on. Yeah, you can do great, but the whole time you're like, ugh. And we won. We won well. Like, holy cow, we just beat Raleigh Hill. We did. And then we won our next game and our next game, and we're starting we can win the state championship here. I mean, we could really win this. And lo and behold, we did. We beat Ashland, and we won the state championship. 2 weeks later, the Little Leaguers are put on a plane, and they're flown by cost of Little League, fly them down to San Bernardino. And all of us as parents have raised money, raised some more, support the whole community, and we make our way down to San Bernardino. And this is awesome. The awesome facility. I mean, it's almost like a dream. And we're down there, and the kids, they won some, they lost some, but we made it our way to the semifinals where we played Washington on ESPN. I mean, my kid was on ESPN. It was awesome. At that point, I don't care what he does with his life. Okay, he could be a meth addict from here on in. I could say, well, he was on ESPN, so it's all right. So sorry, Noah, but that's about it. You hit the pinnacle of your life at 12. Everything else is downhill. So tell your counselor that. So, anyways, so the point is that so we're there, and so we play Washington. Washington's the number 1 ranked team in the region, in the regionals, and we won. We beat Washington. So we're in the state championship against Montana, and we had beat Montana earlier in the tournament. We're like, so the night before, a bunch of us parents, we are reserving rooms in Pennsylvania, because here's the thing. If they win, the next day the kids fly out and go straight from there. The next day they fly out for Williamsport. And so us as parents, we got to figure out what to do. And I'm thinking, because it's so expensive, I'm like, well, I could sell a kidney, you can sell one of your lungs. We'll get this thing worked out. We can always make another Jonah. We'll sell him, and so It'll be fine. And so we're going to do that. And I remember at the game, we're down by 1. It's like the third inning, fourth inning, something like that. And but we've always been down. We're everything's going good. And all of a sudden, bases are loaded, and kid Cole McKenzie, they pitch the ball. It's on the outside of the plate. Reaches out, tags this ball, and I still think that ball's flying even to this day. I don't think it's left orbit. It is gone. And with it, you just sense that so was our trip to Williamsport. And we lost. We lost the championship game. And you lose on Friday. We lost, I think it was Friday night. And Saturday, we're in a car driving home. We're like, what just happened? We were on our way to Williamsport. I mean, I was already figuring the clothes I'm going to need to buy while I'm there. See, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. We were supposed to go. We were supposed to win. And it didn't happen. Now, again, the last thing I want to do is compare a Little League game to Jesus' resurrection. Okay? But the emotions are the emotions. We're driving back and I'm like, wow, what just happened? And had you been a stranger and found me somewhere in Fresno where we stopped to eat lunch and said, hey, heard you guys talking about some baseball, what's going on? I would have turned and snapped at you just like these guys do this stranger who happens to be Jesus. What? What do you mean? You don't know what's going on? Don't you watch ESPN? I mean, we just lost. We shouldn't have lost. You know, and what they say to Jesus is, are you a visitor to Jerusalem? You don't know what's going on here? Huh? Don't you have a smartphone? What's going on? And Jesus is great about this. And this is what I love about the Lord. He knows. He knows. But he wants to hear from us, right? He says, no, why don't you tell me about it? You know, there's an interesting thing that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount where he says, I know what you need even before you ask. And sometimes if we read that the wrong way, we could tend to think that, well, if that's the case, I don't need to talk to him. Because if he knows what I need before I ask, what's the point of prayer? I love this story of the two on the road to Emmaus because Jesus willingly loves to be surprised and hear your story. Not that he doesn't know, but he loves to hear you tell it in all of its raw emotion. And that's what happened. He says, what things, he asks. We go down into verse 19. He says, about Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. And the chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. I think that should be underlined there. They crucified him. I mean, as they're telling this story, it's not like they killed him. No. They crucified him. Tuesday, he's on top of the world. Friday, they crucified him. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. And what he means by that is by the third day, if there was any hope that Jesus was alive, it was all but gone. Because I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. Jewish tradition, Jewish culture had it that the spirit of a person would linger in the body for 3 days, and after 3 days it would leave. And so when he says it's the third day, it's like there's no hope. But then he goes on. They went, and what is more, it's the third day since all this took place, verse 22. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen visions of angels. Okay, a vision of an angel, is that the same as an angel? If I saw an angel or I saw a vision of an angel, right? Did they believe the women? Remember we talked about this last week, right? The women come back and say, hey, we saw some angels. We saw Jesus rose from the dead. And their response is, what kind of spices did you take down to Jesus? Were they medicinal spices? You know what I mean? What kind of spices are we talking about here, ladies? Because that's what happens. They come back and they say, oh, you wouldn't understand. I mean, or you wouldn't believe this. We saw these angels and he said Jesus risen from the dead. And you get the sense right here. These guys kind of tipped their hand. Yeah, these women, they said they saw some angels, but we don't know what's going on here. You know, I don't know what they're seeing down there. And they said they saw Jesus raised from the dead, but who knows? They're women, you know. And so that's the whole sense they have. And so they go on, and they say they went to the tomb early in the morning, but they didn't find him. They told us that they had seen visions of angels who said he was alive. Verse 24. Then some of our companions, this is going to be Peter and John, went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. So Jesus, again, they don't know it's Jesus at this point, by the way. He's kind of cloaked himself somehow as a stranger. They're telling this to him, and I imagine Jesus like, okay, so he died, and, you know, if he's talking in the first person, so I told you that I was going to die. I told you that I was going to be buried for 3 days. I told you I was going to raise from the dead. On the third day, the women go, and the angels tell him that he's not here, he's risen from the dead. Your companions have gone to the tomb and saw that he's not there. So what should the conclusion be? What would the natural conclusion be? Jesus is what? If you were the jury, what would you say? Jesus is what? He's alive. But these guys don't get that. You're almost like, Jesus is like, wait a minute. Okay, say this again. So he said he was going to die, raised from the dead. 3 days. 3 days, women go see an angel, say he's risen from the dead. Your companions go and say he's risen from the dead, and you're still confused as to what's really going on here. You see, when we believe that we know how God works and what God's going to do, no amount of facts are going to change our mind. See, Jesus was going to come and oust out the Romans. The Messiah is going to come and establish a new kingdom. The Messiah was going to do this, and this. And since it's not happening like this, and like this, we don't know what's going on. Now, the person on the outside could look in and say, well, it seems obvious. It doesn't seem obvious when we as people, and I'm going to speak for myself here, when I, as Mike Junker, say, this is what God's going to do. This is how God works. This is how God moves in people's lives. This is how God needs to move in my life. And if he doesn't move in this way, if things don't happen in just this way, if he can't fit this in the box, then something's wrong. Because God only works in my preconceived ideas of how he's supposed to work. And I am blinded to what's going on around me, because if it doesn't happen this way, it's not happening. Does this touch anybody other than me? Because I'll tell you what, I felt this. See, because here's the way lives are supposed to go down. You're supposed to be raised with your real mom and your real dad. You're supposed to go off to school in the suburbs, have 2 cars. Then you have to be a white picket fence, just a fence. And you're supposed to grow up, not have anything bad happen to you. You're supposed to eat all the right foods, have plenty of bacon in your diet. And so you're supposed to grow up, go off to college, have great grades, have great scholarships, be great at sports, find the love of your life, get married, have 2.5 kids, and grow old together, sing Beatles songs to one another, and die a beautiful death somewhere on the beaches of Fiji. And your kids are supposed to be Heisman Trophy winners and Nobel Peace Prize recipients, and those kinds of things, right? I mean, that's the way. See, if God loved me, that's the way it would go. Because see, that's the way life is supposed to go. And any time that may divert itself, my prayer life is supposed to draw God back onto that plan. Hey, my picket fence is falling down. Lord, give me strength to help me get my picket fence back up. Oh, okay, good. That was a close one. I almost didn't have my picket fence. You get my drift? So it's pretty confusing when none of it's going the way you thought it would. And it's really discouraging. Because it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go. So Jesus comes up alongside of these guys as a stranger. And listen to what he says. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken!" Exclamation point. Now, again, they don't know this is Jesus. This is a stranger. Usually if a stranger came up to me when I was sharing this kind of thing, I'd punch him in the throat. Well, not necessarily. I would imagine I punched him in the throat because I'm just way too afraid to hurt anybody's feelings. But I would think that. I would think, well, who do you think you are? What's going on here? What Jesus is saying here, he's like, he's not being insulting, okay? The words seem to indicate that, but it's not an insulting thing. What Jesus does, he comes up along these guys, he listens to them, and as soon as they're done, he says to them, hey, listen, maybe there's another way to think about this. Maybe there's another way to connect the dots here. Maybe we should just slow down a bit and think through this. You said that the women met a couple angels that said Jesus had risen from the dead, right? And you had some companions that confirmed that he's at least not there in the tomb. Well, let's maybe rethink what the Bible says about this kind of stuff. It says he starts from Moses and works his way all the way through the prophets, sharing with them how the Messiah would have to suffer these things. Well, they finally get to Emmaus, or close to it, and he's going to pretend to be going on. It's going to say right here that 26, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went to stay with them. So he's going to keep going, and the guys say, whoa, it's late, it's dark, you don't want to do that. Hey, why don't you come with us? You are blowing our minds. Come. And so he says, sure. So he comes, sits down, they're going to share a meal. Then it says here, and when he was at the table with them, he took bread, he gave thanks, he broke it. Does that sound like anything else familiar? Any other things he's done? Yeah. They're not picking it up. And he began to give it to them. Then their eyes were open, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. Jesus is so great. He breaks the bread, hands it to them, and they're eating. They look up. You look just like Jesus. Because they didn't know. I mean, the stranger looks like this. How did you turn into Jesus? What kind of bread did you give us? So they eat the bread, and it's almost like Jesus says, yep, it's me, beep, beep, gone. Just instantly. He's out of here like the Roadrunner. And they're looking at each other. Now, this is really I think this is a wonderful part of the story for those of us that overthink life. He says, they look at one another and they say, I knew there was something different about it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He's like, yeah, me too. What was it for you? He says, my heart. He was speaking to my heart. He wasn't trying to convince me in my mind. He was speaking to my heart. And my heart knew that he was right. Though my mind couldn't figure it out, my heart knew that it was right. There's times in life where your mind won't figure it out. But if you sit still, sometimes your heart will tell you, I don't understand this, but I think what's happening is right. And usually it comes later. But here it says that we felt it in our hearts. So these guys, they gather themselves together and they say, well, we need to go tell the disciples. We need to go tell the disciples about this. So they pack up their stuff, they book back. They find the disciples, they go back to Jerusalem, And they get there and they tell the guys, hey, you would not believe who we just saw. And they're like, no, we saw Jesus. He's alive. Now they're in this room, and the guys are like, oh, come on, did you get in some of the woman's spices? I mean, did you get some of that? No. We saw him. We broke bread. Here's the whole thing, yada, yada, yada. And there he was. And then he just, beep, beep, he was gone. And the moment they say that, you get the sense the disciples are like, okay. And all of a sudden, he shows up in the room, Star Trek style. Here it is, right here. Go down to verse 36. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, peace be with you, shalom. He just shows up, just Star Trek style. And everyone's like, I try to put myself in this place, okay? Just imagine today if he just showed up, like he just shows up. Were there anybody here that would just want to run right now? I mean, they're just like, this is really weird, okay? And he shows up, he says, hey, shalom, peace be with you. I think I'd be, that's what these guys were. They're terrified. It says they were frightened. Okay, I think that's honest. They were startled and they were frightened, thinking that they saw a ghost. He said to them, why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? I think their response is, because you're supposed to be dead. Like, we saw you dead. He's like, yeah. Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bone, as you see I have. I just wonder if they're all banging, trying to get to the door and they can't get it open, Turn around, I'm not a ghost. And so they're just running around like a bad case of Marco Polo. They're all running from him, And so he's like, chill out. Here. Feel my hands. Feel my feet. I'm real. Listen to what it says here. It says, look at my hands and my feet. It is myself. Oh, I'm sorry, verse 40. And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, you should underline that, he asked them, do you have anything here to eat? So it's like, no, and by the way, has anyone got some food? Dude, it's been like days since I've eaten, One of the guys says, I got some broiled fish in my back pocket. Perfect. So he eats it. Now, in all honesty, I think he eats the food to help convince them that he's not a ghost. Because, if he was a ghost, he would have eaten the food, you would have seen the food in his stomach, right? I mean, I don't know how ghosts work, but I imagine that he says, no, I eat. I'm a real person. I'll eat. See, it's in my mouth. Now I'm swallowing it. I'm a real person. I bodily rose again from the dead. I'm not a fig Newton of your imagination. I'm real. But look at what it says here in 41. And while they still did not believe it, because of what? How come they didn't believe? Because of joy and amazement. In the 21st century, we say, if it's too good to be true, it probably what? It probably is. We live in a culture that's pretty cynical, don't we? We live in a time where nobody has good motives. Politicians lie, business people lie, Wall Street lies. Can't trust the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. Can't trust pastors, given. You can't trust anybody. When people say nice things, you don't know if there's strings attached. Too good to be true. I think that's part of the problem with the gospel. If we were just to put a little bit of shame into it, it could go so much farther in people's lives. If we could just put a little bit of works righteousness into it, if we could just tell you that if you just worked a little harder and did this, or if you just gave, or if you just joined in this and that, it could really change your life forever. But the idea that Jesus rose again from the dead for you and for me, and that he's alive, and no matter what you do or say, that's not going to change. That just doesn't fly in our culture. It's hard to believe. It's just too good to be true. And I go back to what I shared at the beginning of this, the boxes that blind. I think for the disciples as well as the two on the road to Emmaus, they had decided that there's no way that this could be possible. God would never do this. God doesn't work like this. God was supposed to, as I said, put in a new kingdom. He's not supposed to work like this. And it's amazing to me that we can have joy and amazement and not have belief. We can have joy and amazement in this place and yet not believe it. Actually, the joy and amazement can get in the way. Because I'll tell you what, you know when I have joy and amazement? When it goes just the way I want it to. Right? Hey, we're going to have a praise time. Let's just praise God for some stuff. You know what we'll praise God for? Everything we prayed for that went our way. That's praise. Now again, I'm not going to argue with that because I think that's awesome, right? There's nothing better when God's will and your will line up with one another. Sometimes it's just a brief moment. They kind of glance off each other. Those are beautiful times, right? Lord, I just pray that happens. Like, there's nothing better than when you pray that you hit the green lights and you hit the green lights. Then it's almost as big as the resurrection sometimes. It's like, yes, you love me, you know. But it's these things. But the thing about Jesus rising from the dead and appearing to these disciples, he says, listen, you are not going to get a beat on me. That the way I work and the way I move is not going to be the way that you work. It's not going to be the way that you move. And it's hard. It's hard to accept this. It's hard to live in this. It's one of those struggles that we have. I was thinking a while back about the places in my life that I carry resentment and unforgiveness. See, I came to the church out of a really messed up home life. My parents got divorced when I was really young. My mom married a man who was addicted to cocaine and beat up on my brother and I really good. And by the time we got out of that environment down in Southern California, we moved up to Oregon, moved up to a little town called Grants Pass. And so went to Grants Pass and I moved in with my dad and my stepmom, where there wasn't drugs involved, but there was still a lot of violence. A lot of violence in our home. Our home was a place, if you came in, there would be pictures that covered about this high on the walls. From punching. There's Kelly. She's back. There you go. There it is. It's awesome. All right, so Matthew 28 is where we're going to be at this morning. We're working our way through the Word. We went through the book of Hebrews about a year and a half ago. We are actually on lesson 69 of the life of Christ. I think the way we've got this added up, I think we're going to be like 78. Hey, bud, do you have any more? Did you run out? Oh, you ran out. Okay, there's a few more up here. Keep your hands held high. We want to make sure you don't miss out. So this letter here is, you don't have to read it now unless you feel a deep need to. This is something that, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. I talked about a sabbatical, and Michael referenced it this morning, a sabbatical that I'm going to be going on next month. And I shared a couple of weeks ago just a few questions and comments, and I thought, well, maybe I'll share that every couple of weeks. I thought, well, I don't need to do that. So I just typed up most of what I said on 2 weeks ago, and so now you have it in writing, and if you get the e-newsletter, you'll see this in the e-newsletter as well. So but I want to make sure just everybody has one before you leave here. So we're going to be in Matthew 28. We've been working our way through the life of Christ. We're in the last week. In fact, Jesus has been crucified. He's risen from the dead. And we've been really doing a lot of work on the life of Christ. Just to give you a heads up, after we're done with this, which we've got 3 more lessons today and 2 more lessons in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we're doing the life of Christ through the synoptics. The preaching team is actually going to start the book of Genesis, and they're going to work through Genesis through the first of the year, and then I'll come back and I'll be here for Exodus and Leviticus. And then once we get out of Leviticus, we're going to go back to the Gospel of John, and we're going to pick up Jesus again, the whole story of Jesus all over again. Now, we won't take a year and a half like we've done with the first three books, but we're going to come through the book of John and pick up Christ again, pick up Jesus again. So for some of you like, Mike, I'm just fed up with Jesus. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I can't do any more of the Jesus stuff. Can we move on? Can we move on? I'm tired of Jesus. Well, just don't sit too close to me when you say stuff like that. If you get bug zapped, that's your own deal. So So the thing is that I got to tell you, it's blessed my heart to go through piece by piece, looking at this. Man, it's just been great. And not to re-preach the entire series again, but I just really have been encouraged by it. I hope you have been too. And so as we get close to the end here, we're seeing some things really come out. And this morning is no different, really. So I want to pick up Matthew 28, verse 1. We're going to pick up a little bit of what we talked about last week to ramp us into this morning. So Matthew 28, verse 1 reads like this. After the Sabbath at dawn, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb rolled back the stone and sat on it. And his appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. And the guards were so afraid of him that they shook and they became like dead men. And the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here, he's risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. And there you will see him. Now I've told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb. This is where we're picking up this morning. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy. That's a great section to circle in your Bible. They were afraid yet filled with joy. And they ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly, Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. And they came to him, they clasped his feet, and they worshipped him. And then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." We have spent a lot of time over the last 3 weeks talking about these women. These women have been a major part of the gospel exploding out onto the scene. And this morning I'm going to touch on a topic that I don't get to I don't teach on very often, because I don't like to force an issue into a text. But I think this morning it really lends itself open to the idea of women and in the church and ministry. Because I think one of the things we find here is that Jesus consistently is loving on women and watching that love pour out to others. And I think sometimes, especially if is there anybody that's grown up in the church? I mean, kind of been to church most of their life. I mean, raised in churches. Yeah, I mean, I have both hands up just to help other people. I saw some of you didn't raise your hands. So I'll raise my hand for you. Okay, so I know some of you have been here a long time. I mean, this is one of these subjects that unfortunately isn't talked about very often, for all kinds of reasons, I'm sure. I'm going to talk about it this morning, and I want to share this morning a little bit about this. I want to share my heart on this, and I want to emphasize this. This is my heart, okay? But we're not going to drift too far from the text here. But I want to begin by saying this, and this is just to kind of pique everybody's curiosity when I write Jesus the feminist. All right. Now, some of you right now, my red state Republicans have already left the room. All right. So just sit down, relax. I'm not, Jesus is not the chairman of the National Organization of Women. I'm just saying that if you take a look at what feminism as it was defined, which I had in my notes that are no longer here. Oh, wait a minute. They are here. Awesome. I don't have anybody to blame. All right. So it's defined as the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. You have to understand what's going on in the first century. In the first century, the role that women played was not equal to men. Women were seen almost as a commodity. In fact, when you got married, you had to buy your bride. Is your bride worth 4 chickens and a goat, 9 goats and a donkey? I mean, you had to buy your bride from a parent. It was also, there was a Jewish limerick that was like, it's better to be a dog or a slave than it was to be a woman. There was a little Jewish limerick that talked like that. Divorce in the Bible was huge, and one of the things that you could do is a man could look at a woman and say, "You burned my eggs," and this is a real example that's recorded. You could burn my eggs, and in so doing, you could just simply divorce a person. You can hand them a certificate of divorce. And a woman didn't have a means to make any money, so they were out on the street. Primarily, that's where they found themselves. Women could not testify in court because it was thought that their testimony wouldn't be valid. So the testimony or the eyewitness account of a woman didn't carry any weight. So you can understand, we talked about this last week a little bit, that when the women got back to the disciples and told them, hey, Jesus, you've got to tell you what we saw. Jesus isn't there. Jesus isn't in the tomb. The disciples, it writes that they saw it as nonsense, what the women were saying. Didn't take them seriously. So when we read in Scripture, especially the Gospel of Luke, if you read the Gospel of Luke, you find consistently Luke points out more than any of the other writers how women are an intricate part of Jesus' ministry and life. That it's Mary who's sitting at the feet of Jesus listening to him. That might just sound like that's a real cute story, but to have a woman sitting at the feet of a rabbi, especially a rabbi like Jesus, was unheard of. You know, Martha working in the kitchens is the way it was supposed to be. Martha's upset because Mary is breaking the rules. She's not supposed to be sitting. That's where the men sit. They're not supposed to be sitting right at the feet of Jesus, but that's where Mary was. And Jesus has in no way says, hey, Mary, get up, go to the back. He says, no. In fact, remember that story, right? It says Mary is doing what's best. And consistently throughout Jesus' life, you watch him draw women in and empower them and release them in ways that their culture wasn't. Now, I'd like to say that the church has done a good job of remedying that since Jesus rose from the dead. But that probably wouldn't be the truth, would it? We struggle with it. We struggle with it on a number of levels. And so this morning, I want to speak to it, frankly, as we go through the text. And so, as I do, I want to make sure that I say something very, very clearly. I'm giving you my opinion on the way I see it, okay? And so there are a lot of smart people that may not agree with me. And I give everybody the right to be wrong, all right? There's a lot of smart people out there that would not agree with what I'm saying, and people that I appreciate, love, and have studied under. But at the same time, I want to be honest with where I'm at and where we're at as a church to a degree. And so we're going to talk about some of these things, okay? But before we jump into that, I want to give you the name of a gal named Amy Carmichael. If you're one that likes a little bit of history and wants to read a biography, this might be a good name to pick up. Amy Carmichael was born December 16th, 1867. She came from a Protestant Christian missionary, and she served in India. She opened an orphanage and founded a mission in Donvar. She served in India for 56 years without furlough and authored many books about the missionary and a missionary's work. She was born in a small village in Northern Ireland to devout Presbyterians, and she was the oldest of 7 children. After her father's death, she was adopted and tutored by a man by the name of Robert Wilson. He was the co-founder of the Keswick Convention. In many ways, she was an unlikely candidate to be a missionary. She suffered neuralgia, which is a disease of the nerves that made her whole body weak and achy and often put her in bed for weeks on end. It was at the end of the Keswick Convention of 1887 that she heard of Hudson Taylor speak about missionary life, and soon afterwards she became convinced that her calling was to do the same type of work. And so initially, Amy had traveled to Japan for 15 months. She later found her lifelong vocation in India, where she was commissioned by the Church of England, and much of her work was with young ladies, some of whom were saved from forced prostitution. And the way the story goes is that there were temples in India where they would kidnap and take young girls and force them into a sex slave trafficking back. And this is happening again. You know, we hear about it today, but it's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, and especially in India. Well, when she heard about that, her heart broke. And she went to India and she started an orphanage. And she was so committed to this, and she knew because she was a woman and because she was alone that she had to mix with the culture. So she dressed like she was Indian. She dyed her skin with coffee every day. She bathed in coffee so it made her skin brown so she could better connect with the people in that region. And to this day, there are tens of thousands of little girls that have not been raped because of the work she did. She did it for the Lord. When she died, there wasn't a tombstone that was placed over her grave, but instead, many of the girls, and we say many, thousands of the girls, gathered together and decided to put a bird bath on her grave where she laid. And on the side of the birth bath, it just says Amma, which means mommy. She gave the love of God to a bunch of broken and hurting little girls. A woman, a young gal, wrote Amy Carmichael one time and asked about the missionary life, and in a sense asked the question, what's it like to be a missionary? And Amy Carmichael's quote is one that I'll never forget. I read it years ago. And she wrote back and she said, a missionary's life is simply a chance to die. That's it. Talk about a woman that got it. It's a chance to live our lives in such a way that every day we get up, we get to die to ourselves and live for Christ, which is the most glorious way to live. Every day. Every day. And there's droves of stories like this, of women who were used by God to impact thousands of people in the name of Jesus Christ. I think we need more stories like that. And I think we need more stories like that, not just from the 1800s. We need stories like that in 2014. And I want to believe this place is a place where that can happen for young men and young women who want to do great things for God. That this is an atmosphere and a culture that we have in this place where women and men, everybody knows that they have been called and empowered to love the whole world for Jesus Christ, one person at a time. That's my prayer. And that's why I get up every day. That's why I come on Sundays. Because it's my belief that things happen like that all the time. Which reminded me of a side note. Y'all know Corey DeForest? Not all of you do, but many of you know Corey DeForest. He's come, he's preached here. Young man. He graduated from Bible college earlier this year. He just got hired this week to be a pastor up at a small church in northern Oregon, up on the coast. It's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. He's following his calling, doing a great job. I talked to the pastor, by the way. He called me, he said I wanted a recommendation. He wanted a recommendation of that. And I said, well, tell me the job he's going to do. I'll tell you if I'll recommend him if it's a job that he can do it. He told me about it, and I said, oh yeah, Corey's got character, integrity, all the things you would want in a man, in a person that's going to stand up and teach and preach and display the Word of God. And I said, but I got to tell you something. And I don't know if you get many phone calls like this, but I just want to share with you that Corey comes from real life, comes from Bend, Oregon. He's from our tribe. He's from our people. And I want you to know, there's not many of us that are like us, okay? So all of his quirkiness you can blame on us. He's pretty quirky because he's like us. I said, so here's the thing. If Corey becomes rebellious or becomes obstinate or starts doing some wonky things up there and he won't listen to you, you call us. And we'll drive up there and we'll make sure that he gets straightened out. We'll do our part. And he was like, oh yeah, well, he laughed. He said, yeah, I'm sure that won't happen. I said, well, don't be so sure. When it happens, give us a call. I said, but I also want to say this. If Corey calls me and says that the church that he's been hired to is a meat grinder, and you're not taking care of him and his family, and you're not loving on him, I will lead a team up there myself. We'll break your knees. And we will. Because you see, this is who we are. This is our family, and we love everybody. Just because you may go off and go to Bible college sometime, you are part of our family. You're ours. You're lifelong with us. And so, I share that with you because that's for everybody. That's for everybody. So these women show up at the tomb, right? And I want to say there's a number of firsts that take place, by the way. This is a story of firsts. Last week's first. If we go through last week's story, here's what we find. Number one, there's an empty tomb. The women are the first people to see the empty tomb. Did you realize that? It's a woman. The women come and see the empty tomb. It's women who were first to hear the angels and to hear the news that Jesus had risen from the dead. It was the women who were then the first to see the burial clothes. Remember, the angel says, hey, you got to check this out. He's not here. This is remember where he was? He's not here anymore. Take a look. Look at his burial clothes. They're not there. Guess who got to be the first to do that? The women. And then it's the women who are told by the angels, go to the disciples and tell them that he's risen from the dead and he will meet them in Galilee. You go and tell them. This is a first of everything. I mean, first to see the tomb, first to hear the angels, first to see the clothing, first to be commissioned by God to go and tell the good news. We realize that, right? I mean, I don't see anywhere along the way where God's wringing his hands like, boy, I sure wish a couple of guys would have shown up. But I guess we got women. Go tell them. I don't think that's the case. It's almost like he had this planned. So now we get to Matthew 28. So the women leave the tomb and they're running. They're running back to the disciples, all right? And in the midst of running back, it says suddenly, I don't know if this is like Star Trek style, like a Jesus appearance, like there he is right there. But whatever it is, he's running or they're running and they meet up with him. And when it says they met, the Greek word there is it's an unexpected meeting. They're like taken back, which rightly so. Now they had been told that he had risen from the dead, but I don't know if they thought that they would actually see him. But they did. As they're running, Jesus says to them, and I think it's just, it's like Jesus is so subtle, hello? He doesn't, if it was me, if I'm Jesus, my first time showing up after the